Namaste, I'm Samta Auntie, the founder and CEO of Virtual Preschool, where children have fun learning Hindi through English. Today we are going to learn flatware and China vocabulary in Hindi. So what's flatware? Flatware is the utensils you use to eat with, such as a spoon, fork, and knife. And what's China? China are dishes like plates, bowls, and glasses. So let's learn how to say these words in Hindi. So first we have glass. Now this is kind of an easy one. We say gilas. Gilas is glass. Fork, kanta. Kanta. Spoon, chammach. Chammach. Knife, chaku. Chaku. Plate, thali. Thali. Bowl, katori. Katori. And the easiest one is napkin. We say in Hindi napkin as well. So let's do these again. Gilas is glass. Kanta, fork. Chammach, spoon. Chaku, knife. Thali, plate. Katori, bowl. And napkin, napkin. Now I'm going to ask you some questions, and I want you to tell me which utensil or utensils you'd use to eat each item. So what would you use to eat pizza? And before you say, well, I use my hands. Okay, fine. In everyday life, if you use your hands to eat pizza, I totally understand that. But for today's lesson's purposes, let's try to assume that you use some utensils instead. So please tell me, which utensils would you use to eat pizza? Would you use a kanta? Hanji or nahi? What about a chammach? Hanji or nahi? And what about a chaku? Hanji or nahi? So when I eat pizza, I use a kanta, a fork, and I use a chaku to slice it. Now, bache, don't use a chaku without your parents' permission, okay? Chakus are sharp and they can be dangerous. So I'm an adult, so I use a chaku, but remember, don't use chakus without your parents' permission, okay, bache? All right. So kanta and chaku. What about for pasta? What would you use to eat pasta with? Would you use a kanta, chammach, or chaku? Say it out loud, please. I want you to practice saying these words. Which of these would you use? So for me, when I eat pasta, I use a kanta and a chammach. I use a kanta and a chammach. All right, what about if you were eating garam garam dal? Garam garam dal. Then what would you use? Probably a chammach, right? We'd use a chammach, a spoon. What about for putting butter on your toast? If mama or papa put butter on your toast for you, then what do they use? They use if you said chaku, shabash, that's exactly right. Now some people also use a chammach. Maybe all the dishes are dirty and you don't have a clean chaku, so then you can also use the back of a chammach too, right? All right. Now, what would you use out of these to eat popcorn? A kanta, a chammach, or a chaku? We don't use any of these. This is a trick question that I put in there. For popcorn, we don't use a kanta, right? Or a chammach, or a chaku. We use our hathon, our hands, or our ungliyan, our fingers. All right. Now this is where it gets real, bache, because I'm going to ask you the same questions, but the words are no longer there, so you can't read the words anymore. I'm testing your memory here. So tell me now, if you were going to eat pizza, what would you use? A fork, spoon, or knife, or more than one of these. And I want you to use the Hindi word to say it out loud. What would you use? If you said kanta, fork, shabash. And maybe a chaku, knife. Very good. All right, what about for pasta? What would you use? A fork, a spoon, or a knife? If you said kanta, shabash. And in my case, I use kanta and chammach and a spoon. All right, what about for your garam garam dal? For your garam garam dal, would you use a fork, a spoon, or a knife? A spoon, right? And how do we say spoon in Hindi? If you said chammach, shabash. All right, what about to put butter on your toast? What would you use to put butter on your toast? A fork, a spoon, or a knife? Probably a knife, right? And how do we say knife in Hindi? If you said chaku, excellent. And let's look at these examples. Ooh, what if you're going to eat cereal? What do you use for cereal? A fork, a spoon, or a knife? Use a spoon, right? And how do we say spoon in Hindi? If you said chammach, excellent. And again, for butter on our toast, what do we use? If you said chaku, shabash. And what about if we were having a nice warm stack of pancakes? What do you use for that? Probably a fork and maybe also a knife, right? So how do we say those in Hindi? If you said a fork is a kanta, excellent. And if you said a knife is a chaku, great work. So let's review these words one more time. So kanta is fork, chammach is spoon, chaku is knife, gilas is glass, thali is plate, katori is bowl, and napkin is napkin. Great work! Dhanyavad for listening. Keep practicing these words, and I'll see you in class.